before swords clashed and banners fell, before the fields of Grunwald turned red with blood, Europe stood on the edge of transformation. The early 15th century was a time of shifting powers. The Teutonic Order, once hailed as Holy Crusaders, had carved out a militarized state along the Baltic coast. Cloaked in white crosses and wielding iron discipline, they presented themselves as defenders of Christendom, but to their neighbors they were conquerors, brutal, ambitious, expansionist. Meanwhile, to the south, a new alliance was rising. Poland and Lithuania, two kingdoms with vastly different cultures, had united under the rule of Ladislaw Jagiello, a Lithuanian Grand Duke who had converted to Christianity to marry the Polish queen. This union wasn't just political, it was strategic. Together, they formed the largest state in Europe, a patchwork of languages, religions, and identities, and the Teutonic Knights saw them as a threat. Years of border skirmishes and political tension boiled over into war. The Teutonic Order called it a crusade, but to Poland and Lithuania, it was survival. In July of 1410, both sides marched to Grunwald, not just to win a battle, but to decide the fate of an entire region. The night before the battle, the camps on either side pulsed with unease. In the Polish-Lithuanian camp, soldiers shared stories by firelight, some tales of past glories, others whispered fears of what dawn would bring. Many had never fought in a battle of this scale. Among them were seasoned knights, untested peasants, and warriors from distant corners of the Grand Duchy, speaking different tongues but bound by one purpose. They prayed, they sharpened blades, they waited. Jagiello remained calm, or at least appeared to. A seasoned diplomat and strategist, he knew the terrain, the stakes, and the enemy. He spent the night reviewing formations with his commanders, among them his cousin Vytautas, whose fierce leadership had earned him both loyalty and fear. In the Teutonic camp, confidence bordered on arrogance. The knights believed themselves invincible, warriors of God, defenders of the faith. Their armor gleamed, their ranks were disciplined, and they believed their enemy, a coalition of pagans and Catholics, nobles and commoners, would crumble under the weight of divine steel. Their Grand Master, Ulrich von Jungingen, made it clear, tomorrow they would deliver a decisive blow. They had come not just to win, but to crush the alliance. And then came the provocation. 2 swords, sent under a white flag, delivered to Jagiello, a gesture of scorn, a challenge to fight without delay. The king said nothing, but in his silence, he was already planning their downfall. As the morning haze burned off, the battlefield revealed itself. A wide plain surrounded by forests, choked with heat and silence. Each side stood ready, the Teutonic Knights in rigid formations, their white surcoats stark against the green fields. Across from them, a sea of banners from every corner of the Polish-Lithuanian alliance fluttered in the wind. Then, the quiet shattered. Vytautas gave the order, and the Lithuanian cavalry surged forward like a tidal wave. Light and fast, these horsemen were born of the steppes, masters of maneuver, archery, and hit-and-run warfare. Arrows whistled through the sky, falling like deadly rain upon the Teutonic flank. The first clash was thunderous. Hooves tore up the earth, steel met steel. Screams rose above the chaos. The Teutonic left reeled from the impact, but they were disciplined, trained to absorb and counter such assaults. Their lines bent, but didn't break. Then, with brutal precision, they struck back. Heavily armored knights crashed into the lighter Lithuanian riders, cutting through their ranks with cold efficiency. Panic rippled through the Lithuanian lines. Some regrouped, others faltered. A few turned and fled into the woods, a move that looked like cowardice, but would soon prove to be something else entirely. Seeing the Lithuanians retreat, the Teutonic Knights believed the enemy was shattered. Ulrich von Jungingen, watching from his command post, interpreted the withdrawal as a rout. He ordered his forces to press forward, believing the day was his to claim. A wave of steel began to roll across the field. The knights advanced with terrifying precision. Formations tightened, drums pounded, banners surged forward like blades. Their heavy cavalry thundered ahead, crashing into the remaining Polish-Lithuanian lines. It was a wall of force, well-trained, well-armored, and utterly relentless. On the battlefield, it looked like the alliance was breaking. Units faltered, some retreated, others held firm, clashing in brutal close combat. Polish infantry dug in. Hussars fought tooth and nail to hold the flanks. Amid the chaos, a strategic truth unfolded. The Teutonic lines were stretching thin. Their initial discipline began to fray. The forest on one side and marshy terrain on the other funneled their advance, narrowing their momentum into a bottleneck. And Jagiello was watching, unmoved. From a hilltop, he observed their every move, waiting for his moment. He had not committed his main force yet. He hadn't moved his reserves. Every soldier under his command stood ready, calm before the storm. The knights didn't know it yet, but they were walking straight into a trap. One carefully laid, patiently baited, and soon to be sprung. Then came the signal. A banner lifted high on the hill. A horn blew across the field. And with terrifying precision, Jagiello unleashed the storm. Polish heavy cavalry surged from the rear, a tide of armored riders emerging from the tree line, charging straight into the Teutonic center. Their lances leveled, voices raised, hooves pounding like war drums against the earth. The timing was perfect. The Teutonic Knights had overextended themselves, chasing a victory that wasn't there. Now their flanks were exposed, their center was unprotected, and from that vulnerability, chaos erupted. Steel met steel. The sound of colliding armor echoed like thunder. Knights were ripped from their saddles. Horses crashed into each other. The precision of the Teutonic advance dissolved into frantic survival. Jagiello's forces pressed with discipline and fury. It wasn't just brute strength, it was strategy in motion. The Poles had been trained to wait, to strike not first, but best. Every moment became more desperate for the knights. Communication broke down. Units lost cohesion. What had been a well-oiled war machine was now a fragmented mess of individual survival, and the worst was still to come. From the forests, the Lithuanian cavalry reappeared. Vytautas had regrouped. His riders swept down onto the Teutonic flanks once more, not in retreat this time, but in vengeance. The knights were now surrounded, hammered from the front, crushed from the side. Their confidence turned to confusion, then fear. When Vytautas returned to the battlefield, he brought more than just cavalry. He brought momentum and vengeance. His forces struck the Teutonic right flank with unrelenting speed. Their arrows rained down, forcing knights to raise shields or fall. Then came the charge, swift, disciplined, and merciless. The Teutonic ranks, already battered from the Polish assault, buckled. What had once been a calculated advance now collapsed into total confusion. Commanders shouted orders no one could hear. Flags vanished in the dust. Horses reared in panic, and knights turned to see enemies behind them, beside them, everywhere. Some tried to regroup around the Grand Master. Others fled toward the woods, hoping to escape the tightening circle. But Vytautas had predicted that too. His troops pushed forward, sealing off exits. It was a textbook encirclement, a classic double envelopment, and it was working. The knights were trapped, not in a skirmish, but in a storm of destruction. What began as a confident march had become a slaughter. For Jagiello and Vytautas, it wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure the enemy would never recover. The noose had tightened, and at its center stood the Teutonic Grand Master, now facing the full weight of a collapsing empire. In the midst of chaos, one man still believed the battle could be turned. Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen, armored in white and mounted on a black warhorse, rallied his elite bodyguard. With defiance burning in his eyes, he launched a desperate charge, a final attempt to break through the Polish lines and strike down King Jagiello himself. The charge was thunderous. Like a spear through the storm, they cut across the battlefield, slashing down any who stood in their way. For a moment, it seemed they might make it. But Polish forces swarmed around them. Surrounded, outnumbered, and outmatched, the Grand Master fought with a fury born of desperation. He struck down foes with his sword, refusing to surrender, and then he fell. Ulrich was killed in the melee, his body trampled in the mud. When news of his death reached the Teutonic lines, what little order remained disintegrated. The heart of the Teutonic Order had stopped beating. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the battlefield fell eerily quiet. Where once stood thousands of proud knights, now lay a sea of broken armor, discarded weapons, and the bodies of the fallen. The Teutonic Order, feared across Europe, had suffered its greatest catastrophe. The losses were staggering. Nearly all of the Order's senior leadership had been killed, including over 200 knights. Their Grand Master was dead, their armies shattered. Survivors either fled or were taken prisoner. Jagiello and Vytautas didn't just win a battle, they dismantled an empire in a single day. The psychological blow to the Teutonic Order rippled across Europe. Their aura of invincibility was gone. Castles across Prussia were left vulnerable. The Order's treasury was emptied to pay ransoms. Morale among their remaining forces collapsed. Though the war dragged on for another 2 years, the truth was clear. The Teutonic Order would never fully recover. For Poland and Lithuania, it was more than a military triumph. It was a moment of unity, a declaration to the rest of Europe that the East was not weak, not fractured, not submissive. Together they had taken down a crusading power at the height of its strength, and the effects would echo for generations. The balance of power in the region shifted. The Polish-Lithuanian Union grew stronger, while the Teutonic state began its slow decline into political irrelevance. Grunwald wasn't just a defeat, it was the beginning of the end for the Crusaders in the Baltic. In the centuries that followed, Grunwald became more than a battlefield. It became a symbol. For Poland and Lithuania, it was the day two nations, often divided by language and culture, stood shoulder to shoulder and triumphed. Chroniclers turned the battle into legend. Poets sang of brotherhood forged in blood. Paintings, literature, and oral traditions immortalized the moment as a cornerstone of national identity. And when new enemies came, imperial powers occupying forces, foreign tyrants, patriots looked back to Grunwald for strength. During uprisings and wars of independence, it became a rallying cry, a reminder that even the most feared enemy could fall. For the Teutonic Order, Grunwald was a wound that never fully healed. Though they limped on for decades, their power waned. Eventually, they faded from the stage of great powers, remembered more for their collapse than their crusade. But the echoes of Grunwald didn't stop in the Middle Ages. Even in modern times, its memory is invoked in politics, in protests, in speeches. Statues stand in its honor. National holidays commemorate it. And to this day, historians debate its full impact on European history. Because Grunwald wasn't just a medieval clash of steel and banners, it was a turning point, a moment where the future changed course. The fields of Grunwald remind us that even the mightiest powers can fall, not from weakness but from underestimating those they seek to conquer. It wasn't just a battle, it was a message carved in steel and soaked in blood. Unity can triumph over might, strategy can outlast arrogance, and history is never just in the past. What forgotten battle do you think changed the world? Drop it in the comments, and we might explore it next. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, subscribe and hit that bell icon. More untold history is just around the corner. This history replay, this day,